You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's Travis Currah and Sheldon Jones. The CFL preseason is done. Week 1 is here, man. How excited are you, man?
I'm very excited. This has been a long off season with all the changes for my team, especially. I can't wait to see what they can do in the field. But just this whole season, I live and breathe CFL football, so I'm just ecstatic it's back.
Welcome to our new viewers, listeners. Every single season when there's a new season, there's always extra excitement. People looking for CFL content, looking to get up to speed for the season, and that's what we're going to do here. On today's show, we are previewing the East Division. So joining us on the show is Troy Durrell with the Eatin' 'Em Raw podcast and 3 Down Nation to preview the Ticats. Tim Cappers with the Alouettes Flight Deck to preview the Owls. Santino Filoso with 3 Down Nation to talk REDBLACKS, and Adam Gosse is the PA announcer for the Toronto Argonauts at BMO Field, so we're going to talk Argos. Now, this stuff was all recorded prior to May 27th, so some of the info may be older news by now, but it's a long show, so let's get to it. And joining the show to talk about the 2024 edition of the Hamilton Tiger Cats is Troy Durrell. He's a contributor to 3downnation.com, and he is with the Eatin' 'Em Raw podcast. Hey, thanks for coming on Two and Out to talk Tabbies, man.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Love the podcast. It was actually, I was thinking about it when you asked me to come on the other day, Travis, like 5-6 years ago when I started to kind of get into the whole podcast scene. This was kind of one of the first podcasts I started to listen to. So I've been a big fan for a long period of time and really excited to be on today.
Well, I'm glad that I've got a beard because I would be blushing a lot. Thanks for saying that, man. The Ticats are coming off 8 and 10 seasons back to back, losing in the East semifinal. It's been sort of a reload in this off season. What's kind of the temperature in Tiger Town right now?
Yeah, it's kind of lukewarm, to be honest. I think it's a lot of wait and see approach. You know, obviously, Will Levi Mitchell shows up to minicamp in a walking boot. And, that's not the best start to things. And I think people are kind of, all right, let's rein this back. Let's kind of wait and see on how he does here in the next couple of weeks with camp and preseason and then the start of the regular season in Calgary. And, they made a bunch of changes. Obviously, Simone Lawrence is no longer with the team. Ted Laurent recently announced his retirement. So there's a lot of new faces in Hamilton, and I think it's kind of a wait and see approach for most fans just because, they might know some of these names that are coming onto the scene in Tiger Town, but I don't think they're household names at this point. So there's some fans that are really excited just because football's back and they don't, the result of the games, I guess, at the end of the day don't really matter to them that much. But there's another part of the fan base that I see constant discourse on Twitter, social media of, who's going to play Will linebacker for Simone Lawrence and, Bo Levi, is he going to actually be able to play a full 18 games? So it's interesting to see. And I guess to kind of sum it up, it is just kind of a wait and see approach, I guess.
Well, I guess I'll ask you about some of those departures. Like, there are some really good players. Now, there have been some players that have been in Tiger Town for a long time. Simone Lawrence, Ted Laurent. We'll even throw Tunde Adeleke in there. Chris Van Zyl, even though he's dealt with a lot of injuries over the past few seasons. I know he was an offensive lineman, but I do kind of want to talk defense here. With some of the long-tenured Ticats leaving, it looks like the defensive line's going to be completely different, but who's going to step up in that leadership role on the defense? Just seems like a completely different group and kind of a changing of the guard in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy that really sticks out to me is Jamal Peters, just kind of based on everything Scott Milanovich has said over the last couple of weeks, is that he's naturally kind of taken that step into that role. And the one, I guess, kind of nice thing for them to be able to deal with the fact that they've had so many changing faces is that there's not really one guy who has been there that everyone kind of turns to. And, guys like, as I mentioned, Jamal Peters, I think Casey Sales is another one that is going to have to step up, just being one of the older guys on the team, having CFL experience. And yeah, it's going to be, I think, kind of a leadership by committee instead of looking at Ted Laurent or Simone Lawrence to kind of lead the way. But those two guys, I think, are the ones that I would headline as, kind of the new leadership group. And the thing about them is the fact that it's been very natural. Like, they're not forcing themselves into that role. It's just kind of happening. And, when Jamal Peters, especially with what he's done in his resume and his short time in the CFL, you listen to what he says, right? So it's definitely a guy that I think is beneficial to have in the room. And, Casey Sales is maybe more of a guy that leads by example. But it's good to have both. And I think that those are two guys that will definitely step up and kind of be the leaders for the Ticats on defense this year.
Okay, going off the field, we had Orlando Steinhauer, take himself out of the head coaching. He's now the president, just the president. Scott Milanovich is in, Ed Hervey, GM. Like, tell us what you think about those moves that were made.
Yeah, I think those moves needed to happen. Obviously, with Steinhauer, the first couple of years were pretty solid, and then you just saw kind of the steady decline. And I think Milanovich at this point in time is the guy that makes the most sense. In the offseason, we talked about it just kind of in our little group chat that we have. Like, Corey Mace was a guy that I was interested in. Milanovich was a guy that I was maybe a little more on the fence about, but kind of the more that I've seen and the more that I've heard from him and look back at his track record of being able to, revitalize quarterbacks, develop quarterbacks, especially Taylor Powell. I think that this is his team here in the next couple seasons, maybe as early as this year. And to have a guy that knows how to develop those quarterbacks, I think he's the right guy for this job. And Hamilton, they're still trying to compete. Like, they've said it a couple times here over the offseason that this isn't a rebuild. Like, they're trying to reload and retool. And if you're trying to compete and be competitive, especially now with what happened in Toronto with Chad Kelly, the East is pretty wide open. And I think that if you're looking for a guy to kind of who has experience, who knows how to win a Grey Cup, who's won a Grey Cup, I think that Scott Milanovich was the right person for that job. And in terms of Ed Hervey as the general manager, I'm glad that they went away from having the trio kind of co-GMs, because that seems like too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, of talent evaluators, and to have two guys kind of reporting to one person and him kind of having the final decision, I think that is going to be beneficial as well, just because, clearly it wasn't working what they were doing with Steinhauer as the head coach and the co-GMs as the decision makers in terms of recruiting talent. So I think there's an actual sense of direction that the team can go in now, and I think that it might be the right one.
Yeah, so you briefly touched on the quarterback situation there. Let's expand on that. So do you think that Bo Levi, if he is healthy, I know he came in like wearing that walking boot, but what do you think his leash is? What do you think's going to happen there? And with Taylor Powell, like you said, with Scott Milanovich there?
Yeah, I don't think the leash on Bo is going to be very long. I would give him, if he comes out and struggles, even if he's healthy and plays to the way that he was playing for most of last year, where he was unproductive, throwing a lot of interceptions, I'd give him to maybe week 4, maybe even a little earlier. I think that's a pretty fair assumption. I mean, Powell, if he was coming in as a raw rookie again, then obviously you're kind of forced to show your hand and maybe give Bo a longer leash. And I think that last year, in a lot of ways, for the team was really beneficial with all the injuries that they dealt with at the time. Not beneficial, of course, but to be able to have the opportunity to see guys like Taylor Powell, or on defense, Kenneth George Jr. or Dexter Lawson or Will Sunderland, to be able to see what they're able to do in live reps against starting quality caliber defenses and talent, I think was good for them. And I mean, Taylor Powell, everything that I've heard coming out of training camp has been really solid. But I will say that I was just watching, prior to coming on to the call here, was watching Milanovich's press media scrum, I guess, at the end of today, and he said that Bo looked as good as he's ever seen him in his time in Hamilton at the scrimmage on Sunday, which, it's a controlled scrimmage. The offense obviously has the advantage because there's no contact. And but it is a promising sign. So I guess we'll see. But I don't think the leash on him will be long, and nor should it be, especially when you have a quality backup in Taylor Powell.
There is a culture of great defensive line play in the Hammer, and it's gone back half a century. But there's a lot of changes on that D-line this year. We've already mentioned Laurent, Malik Carney's off to Saskatchewan. Jamal Davis ended up retiring. Dylan Wynn, he was injured a lot last year, but he's gone as well. In come CFL veterans like Nick Usher, Brandon Barlow, and Dwayne Hendricks. How are the Ticats looking at getting after the quarterback in 2024?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid foundation to start. So last year, everyone kind of looked at the defensive line, myself included, and went, yeah, this is going to be a strong suit of the team. And then, Kwaku Boateng retires. Jagarrett Davis was nowhere near the player that Ticat fans were really expecting him to be. He took obviously a massive dip from even what he was in 2022, which wasn't kind of what Ticat fans had become accustomed to when he was in Toronto. And I think that they took the right approach this year of getting younger at that position. Obviously, you mentioned there's still guys that have CFL experience with Hendricks and Barlow. Nick Usher has played, obviously, probably the majority of that group of guys, but they got younger and are looking to sign guys that it's not so much really what they've done in the past. It's more so what they're going to do in the future. And that was kind of the model, I guess, Toronto took last year, especially with guys like Ormolade. And I think Hamilton decided, hey, this copy of whatever they're doing is working. Obviously 16-2. Let's try and mimic it as much as possible. So Hamilton pillaged the Argonauts and tried to take as many guys from them as possible, which, honestly is not a bad strategy. And I'm interested to watch Hendricks and Barlow specifically, because 9.5 sacks, regardless of who you are in a rotational role, is really good. So it'll be interesting to see if the pressure of being the guy is maybe too much for him, or if he is like Florent Ormolade, where he kind of takes that next step and becomes one of the dominant pass rushers in the CFL. But I think at this point in time, I think fans should be excited for the defensive line just because they have so much potential to do great things.
Now let's go across to the other side of the ball here, receivers. So we talked about who's going to be throwing the ball. Let's talk about who's going to be catching the ball. We obviously see that Tim White is the number one, but who do you see stepping up as like the number two, number three?
Yeah. Originally, if you asked me this week and a half ago, I would have said it would have been a newcomer in Justin McGriff, but he unfortunately suffered the torn ACL. I believe it was on Tuesday, that is going to force him to miss the year. And,
second year in a row.
Yeah, the team and parents had high expectations for him last year. And then for the fact that he was able to recover as quickly as he did from his compound fracture to his tibia and able to recover and make it back for camp, fans were really excited to kind of see what he was going to bring to the table. And, so much so that Hamilton went out and cut Terry Godwin II, who was their second leading receiver in 2023. So, there's a lot of unknowns on the receiving core. Right now, I guess if I was to give a name, I'd probably go with Keandre Smith, just due to the fact he has experience. He took a really big jump in 2023, going from like 280 some yards to over 700. And I think he would probably be the guy who is the number two. But we were recording our podcast this morning and we were kind of talking about receiver, because that's probably the biggest question mark on the team right now. And we're talking about Tim White and then obviously Stephen Dunbar from a couple seasons ago. Like, all these guys were rookies and no names at one point in time, right? And the only time you're going to get them to become household names is by playing them. So another name that I think will be really interesting to watch, I'm excited to watch him on Saturday in the preseason game, is Shamar Bridges. He was one of the last cuts, I believe, last year from the Baltimore Ravens, and that was only due to the fact that he had a concussion kind of in one of the final preseason games. So he's interesting to watch. TJ Vasher, he looks like he could be another guy. And then obviously you have the two Canadians in Luther Hakanavanu and Brendan O'Leary Orange that, have shown signs of promise, especially in the case of Hakanvanu, that they need to take that next step though and prove that they're capable of being quality CFL receivers and, not expecting 1,000 yards or anything out of them, but they need to be able to contribute in that kind of 700 to 800 yard range. But right now, I guess the number 2 guy would have to be Keandre Smith just by default.
I guess I want to ask about kick returners too, because Hamilton's had a lineage of great performances at returner as well. I was really excited to see Tyreek McAllister in 2024, but he signs with the Raiders in the NFL. Like right now, is it Keandre Smith going to be returning kicks and maybe doing double duty, or what do you see happening there?
Funny enough, he actually said today in his media scrum that he would love to do more returning. But the team did sign Lawrence Woods III back from BC. I think he's going to be given the first shot. He was pretty productive in 2022 when the team's primary returner before he went out with an injury. And, they tried to transition him more to defense last year. That was not a very good experience. That was definitely something that I'm sure the team regretted after a couple weeks. But, I think he's still a pretty dynamic returner, and I think that he would probably be the man given the first crack at being the team's returner for this year. And, when he was healthy doing it, he was really solid. So I'm interested to see. And now he comes in motivated as well. Being cast off originally from Hamilton, being cast off then from BC. So he has something to prove, and I think that that's a guy that you'll definitely have to watch for in the return game.
And I will ask, just looking at the schedule, October 4th, there's going to be 2 new names added to the Tiger Cats Wall of Fame. Mike Walker, the legendary defensive lineman, and also Bernie Custis, some legends in Tiger Cat lore. And then I see happening June 16th against the Rough Riders. They're having a reunion for that 1999 Grey Cup team. It's the 25th anniversary this year of the Ticats last winning the Grey Cup. So a couple things there. It'll be cool to see some of those 99 guys back in town and getting together and celebrating that anniversary and marking that occasion. But 25 years. For a long time, the Bombers were the butt of the joke when it came to Grey Cup droughts. Now it's the Ticats. Now I feel like there was a lot of pressure because they hosted 2 Grey Cups in 3 years. Now maybe they can relax not hosting a Grey Cup, but Tiger Town has to be a little bit restless when it comes to that.
A little bit. I would say they're very on edge. That's almost everything I post or everything I see always comes back to the drought needs to end. And I'm sure the players are sick of answering the question too, because a lot of them, they haven't had anything to do with the last 25 years, and they're kind of forced to bear the brunt of those questions. And, I can only imagine a rookie who is in his first year in the CFL getting asked about a drought that he's had no part of. But it would be, I think it would be nice, obviously, for fans just to get over that hump. And, there's a generation, my generation, where I was 3 years old the last time Hamilton won a Grey Cup. And so there's not really that kind of lasting memory for a big group of Ticat fans. And, as you mentioned, I think there was a lot of pressure. Obviously, 2021, unfortunately, they were a couple plays away from kind of ending the drought there. Then the pressure gets mounted on even more in 2023, and they got off to a pretty poor start and finish off also pretty poorly. But now that the pressure's off, and as I said, kind of at the top, the East is pretty wide open at this point in time. And I'm not suggesting that Hamilton could be the team that's the front runner for the East. But I mean, last year, no one gave Montreal any sort of a chance to even make the playoffs. And that was our eventual champions. So anything can happen in this league. I think that's why we all love this league. And I'm excited to see what Hamilton does in 2024 because, obviously I'm not there at practice every day. I live in Alberta. I wish I could be as much as possible, but the team kind of skews things into a more positive light. But it does sound like things are more positive coming out of the first week of training camp than maybe they were going in.
There was big news starting.
Yeah. And just blow after blow after blow.
Yeah.
You know, Bo's injured, Jordan Williams retires. You know, then you lose Justin McGriff to injury, and there's a bunch of stuff that happened, and where you look at the team and go, man, like how are they going to overcome this? And you know, I think back to 2013. Obviously, they lost that Grey Cup game, but they were playing all their home games in Guelph, and
Yeah.
had a really young team and were able to kind of bond over that experience. Maybe this group can kind of come together over the fact that there's been already so many things that have happened in the early stages of training camp and before the regular season has even started. And, you know, maybe use that as a tool to kind of motivate them to maybe push through to that next level. Because, you know, Montreal is still probably the front runner in the East just because of how good their defense is and the fact that they're defending champions. You know, Ottawa, I think, is improved. Toronto, if they can get even adequate quarterback play from Cameron Dukes, or, you know, they just signed Nick Arbuckle yesterday. If they're able to get adequate quarterback play, if Chad Kelly returns, I think they'll be right into that conversation as well. And, you know, then there's Hamilton, which if you get Bo kind of back to any sort of what we were used to with him pre-2019, you know, that's a two-time MOP, two-time Grey Cup champion that year.
Yeah.
As your quarterback. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. I think we'll have the most parity in the season this year that we've had in a long time. I know people probably say that every year, but it'll be really fun to track, and I'm really excited to see what the team does in 2024. But yeah, it was kind of a long-winded answer to yes. Fans are getting very antsy, and hopefully they can end that drought here in the next couple of years.
Troy Durrell is a contributor at 3downnation.com, and he's on that Eating Them Raw podcast. They're social media masters, so I admire them for that. Thanks so much for coming on the show to talk the 2024 edition of the Ticats.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me on. As I said, big fan of the show. When you asked me to come on originally, I was like, man, oh, my brother, he listens to it too. He's like, can't believe you're going on tour now. And I was like, yeah, I know. Big thing. So appreciate you guys a lot for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing.
And joining the show now is Tim Capper from the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. Thanks for coming on the show to talk Alouettes football for 2024.
Hey, it's my pleasure, guys. Hey, anytime we get to talk about the CFL in the beginning of the 2024 season, I'm all for it.
Montreal reigning supreme over the Canadian football world right now. The Alouettes won the Grey Cup. The Carabin won the Vanier Cup. And no one had the Alouettes as champs last year. But now I get the feeling that they might be able to kind of come into the season with that chip on their shoulder again, because a lot of people are just saying, last year was a lucky year. How has the feeling been at training camp so far this season?
I mean, to be fair, I've heard, you know, Cody talk about it already. I've heard Coach Moss talking about it already. You know, they've really said coming into it, sure, they are the defending champs, but it's the next chapter in this, you know, for this group of guys, because as you guys know too, all Grey Cup champs are never the same the next year. The teams are never the same. So they're ready. They're ready to just show up and they're ready to say, you know what, last year was last year. We have other reasons to be motivated for 2024. You know, potentially being a back-to-back Grey Cup champs. These guys seem to be ready. And I just can't wait, because we got a lot of good guys obviously coming back, and then some new guys too that's going to make this team very, very interesting, I think, in 24.
I know lots of Grey Cup champion teams kind of fall apart. There's a lot of changes in the off-season. In recent years, we've seen Winnipeg been able to keep it together, and for the most part, Montreal is definitely kept it together, and a lot of those guys decided to stay with the team before free agency opened. I know Marcel Desjardins is back with the team as the assistant GM, but the fans seem invested. I was listening to your latest episode of the show, and they're saying over 3,500 fans were at the intra-squad game. To me, that sounds crazy.
It is. I mean, and considering it's a brand new venue for us this year, because, you know, for the past 2 years, we've been over at Stade Diablo over in Trois-Rivières. You know, us moving over to St. Jerome this year, I was very surprised too. I think it's just a plus, though, versus, Trois-Rivières versus St. Jerome. There's a difference of about 45 minutes between the two places. So if you're able to get there and, within 45 minutes, as Cliff and I did this year, it's so much easier to do. And the fans loved it, man. I'm trying to remember the last time I actually saw cops at an Alouettes practice. They were there, so.
That's wild.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, so the Owls were able to retain most of their core, but they lost some solid players like Austin Mack, Keontae Evans, William Stanbeck. How strong do you think Walter Fletcher's grip is on the starting running back job?
I think for Fletch, he's finally going to be able to get a shot to show that what he's like to be, RB1. And we've talked to him already a few times after practice, and he just really is ready to show what he can do. Obviously, last year we had the three-headed monster at running back. This year, it's very possible we may have the same thing, with Joshua Antwi behind him and some of the other guys who have come into camp. It's going to be fun, but I'm ready for Fletch to show what he can do because, it's funny. The last time I saw Fletch during the regular season is when we were in Edmonton. And he's never hit 100 yards as an opponent versus the Elks, which were his old locale. So he's just ready to show what he can do and not be under William Stanbeck, but I would be gracious to be a running back under William Stanbeck, but it's now his team and he's able to totally different type of running back too. So it's going to really be interesting to see what he can do.
That's good. So Austin Mack had over 1,100 yards last year before leaving for the NFL. The Owls, they signed Tevin Jones, who was in Riderville. I got to see him firsthand. He has great hands, so it'll be good for you guys. And then we have Reggie White Jr. set to return after missing 2023 with a knee injury. So talk about that receiving group.
Well, first let's talk about Reggie because we got to see him really have his first action at the inter-squad game this past weekend. And as I mentioned to Cliff and we mentioned on the show too, is like that really was Reggie's first real action in a year and a half. For him to be able to get on the board, even though the touchdown really doesn't count, for him, I'm sure it meant a lot for him just to be able to show that he can still run the routes properly. Seems to be that he is, because whenever, I'm sure you guys will see this too, is that whenever a guy comes back from an injury, you always wonder, is it lingering in their head? How much is it going to really mess with them when they come back and get on the field and do the cuts that they need to do, et cetera? Reggie looks ready. He really does. And I think, he's actually really, I think he's also motivated because during that time where he was off, he had a new kid. So I think he's there to play not only for himself, but he's there to play for his family. So, and then, this wide receiver core, I think has just getting another year under Tyler Snead, getting under another year under, oh man, it's just so, I'm just curious. So just from Shedler Furvius, to KJG is back after having a shoulder issue. Tyson Philpott, obviously the Grey Cup hero. Charlton Rambo, and Cole Speaker. Some of the guys that really stood up in the Grey Cup really made a name for themselves, not only in camp last year, but was able to show what they can do for the CFL game. And there are a lot of guys too that we've been watching too that really, if they make the team, can really make I think a huge impact. And one of them being Ramo Chokia Brown, who is a wide receiver out of Northwestern. He's the guy that actually had the tie to the Alouettes, where he was the 2023 Offensive Player of the Year in the Indoor Football League. But the funny thing was with him is that his coach at Northern Arizona, that's where the team is, they're called Northern Arizona Wranglers. His coach there is Les Moss, who happened to be Perry Moss's, who happens to be the son of, who was Perry Moss's son, who was a former Alouettes head coach back in the early 60s. So he has, he had kind of has that, Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees of separation type of thing. So.
No, I do look at that receiving room though, and I would say most teams in the CFL, they have an undisputed, number one guy. Hamilton's Tim White, Ottawa's going to be Dom Rhymes, Winnipeg's going to be, they got a couple, Shone, Lawler kind of thing. It feels like receiver, everybody's almost at an even playing field, and the Alouettes have really that chance to spread the ball around here. Like, I don't even know who would be a number one. I like Reggie White Jr. I really like, it's unfortunate that Keon Julian Grant had the injuries last year. Maybe he's got an opportunity to be number one. Is there one that is kind of head and shoulders above the rest?
It's a very good question, because you look at a lot of these guys and they really complement each other very well. I know Reggie White is actually changing positions this year. He's not going to be doing the waggle, so he's going to be stationary at the snap. Man, it's a very good question. It really is. I mean, I guess we could call it could be a Tyson Philpott. I guess we could call him the one for a one. I guess you have a 1, a 1A, and a 1B, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's just so many guys. And it's just a matter of seeing where they're going to fit, because, my surprise was seeing Reggie White, even that we know what happened to him for the past, 1.5 years, he's still a number two. He's still working with the twos, which to me is good because he's complimented by a lot of guys. But all the other guys that we've been talking about, including Tevin Jones, et cetera, he's one. So he's taking basic over for Austin Mack. We're gonna have to wait and see. Let's wait and see what happens at the first preseason game. Let's see who gets most of the reps, etc. And maybe we can decide who they will deem as WR1.
In short amount of time last year, I felt like James Letcher Jr. already put a lot of highlights on tape. Is that going to be happen again this year? I mentioned the Cliff. The dude is in his early 20s, but he just seems to be a kid at heart. I think they were doing something over on social media the other day with Tyson, and he photobombs a video session. The guy looks like he watching him at camp, he's having so much fun. And he's now the returner right now in Montreal. Nice. They've got a couple of guys that are behind him, but I think right now, could he bring it to the house? Sure, why not? I mean, he looks really set, but it's funny how the Owls have been able to, when it comes to the returning game. It seems like everybody is able to step in. Letcher goes down late in the third quarter in the Grey Cup. Tyson Philpott knows how to do the how to return. That's how he basically started before he became a wide receiver here in the CFL. So he knows what to do. But Letcher, I can't wait to see what he does, man. He's gonna be so much fun to watch. And if you haven't seen him, you got to watch an Owls broadcast and just see what he can do.
Yeah. So we'll switch gears here. A little bit of a controversial topic, but let's talk about Shawn Lemon. So he retired, and then it was announced that he was indefinitely suspended due to gambling. So the Owls brought in Isaac Adiemi Berglund, Dylan Wynn, and Derek Wiggins, all vets on the D-line. So do you think they had the sense they were preparing for life after Shawn Lemon, or what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, honestly, if you look at the timeline for Shawn Lemon, I think all of that occurred within less than 2 weeks. He all of a sudden, he signs a one-year extension, then he retires, then the whole suspension thing comes out, and then he's they're saying it's not an issue. He's been a part of camp from day one, since he has made his. Since he said, I'm going to try to fight this, even though in my opinion, seems to be clear and cut. I mean, either you bet or you didn't. I think Danny Mac has always been looking for a player to back up somebody no matter what. And I think just a matter of who they signed on for the defense for free agency this year. It was just a matter of who can complement each other, because, you also got Darnell Sankey too, who was brought in by Lemon, so I think we'll be okay. I think really for me, the question is how many games does Lemon play this year? Because as we know, as we've seen before, the process when it comes to fighting a suspension in the CFL can just be taking a little bit too long for whatever particular reason. So it's, Deron Carter. So I
I was going to ask, maybe it's not appropriate. If you're a betting man, is he on the field by Labor Day? I don't even really know how they're going to go about this at all. Are the Owls preparing as though he's going to be playing?
But that's the funny thing too, guys, is that if you got receipts, I understand. I mean, I get how he can appeal this. Every player is allowed to appeal something through the CFLPA. I get it. But I've been trying to think of how many weeks. If we were to go with an over/under, I would probably say week 8. If the process goes swiftly,
right? Yeah.
But I think if that it is the case where it does come to fruition that he is suspended and he is. See, by the way, he was suspended. He wasn't banned.
Yeah.
Indefinite.
Yeah. It's not like the guy for the Toronto Raptors or Pete Rose.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, but this is me just guessing. If it goes according to plan, I would probably say we'd have him through week 8. That's my guess. But I think the Owls are fine when it comes to the defense because Danny Mac, again, he always has a plan. Danny, he doesn't matter who he has on his roster. If he's able to grab somebody, he will. So we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
As a Western fan, I remember by the time Danny Mac left Edmonton, everybody was kind of laughing at him. But now, look at what he's done in Montreal. It's been so impressive, and the culture and the team that he's built. He's done a hell of a job getting back in the CFL. Now, I want to ask you, I think that the Alouettes personally have the best linebacker room in the league. Beverett, Stubblefield, and Sankey, and those guys were flying all over the place last year. So let's not talk about them. I think they're set. Like, what is an area of team or of the team that maybe you are concerned about? Maybe a hole that stands out to you going into 2024.
Wow. I look at the roster itself. Honestly, I know we were talking about Fletch before, but I'm curious to see how the running game does go because we had Stanback was the incumbent for all those years. And Fletch was only a part-timer, really. I guess it's just a matter of what type of game plan that they have set up for him to be as RB1. That to me, that's one of the few things. And wide receiver, we got a plethora of those things. When it comes to the quarterbacks, I don't think there really are any holes. Cliff and I were just talking about it recently that, it's very rare that the Alouettes have less than 4 quarterbacks in camp, which just happens to be the case this year. We have 4. Slight modifications. You have Cody and you have now Davis Alexander, who's currently with the 2s, and Caleb Evans with the 3s. I honestly think that they are set. If Cody happens to go down, I think Davis Alexander can do a great job backing him up because this dude can sling the ball. He really can. God, are there any other holes that I can think of, man? I don't.
Well, they're the champs.
I know. Well, how many players cannot actually do that onside punt properly? How about that?
Hey, see? That's a hole for 8 other teams, I would say.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you about the fan experience. They've installed a new big screen at the stadium. I've seen that they've got these new, I don't know if they're new, but these premium seats with the backrests. You can get seat service. I mean, that sounds pretty darn good. And then August 25th, they'll be marking the 50th anniversary of the 1974 Grey Cup. And they're saying a one-of-a-kind jersey maybe. So on the schedule and going to Percival Molson, what are you looking forward to most this season?
I'm obviously first and foremost, I'm looking forward to the atmosphere. I honestly think that the game on June 20th when they unveil the banner, I would not be surprised if it's going to be very close to being a game that's sold out. And also too, whenever they decide to announce who the halftime band will be, I'm sure it'll play a huge part on what size the crowd is that game. Because last year, Our Lady Peace.
Yeah.
Cliff and I have mused who it could possibly be. I mean, could it be Simple Plan? They have their own ties to Montreal, obviously.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Awesome. And they are big Canadian group, obviously. But I just like how that PKP has basically put his trust into Mark Waitman and the crew and getting everything what they need to do over at Percival Molson. I was there just the other day. They're painting up the place. They're adding the flags that need to be there. As you said, the new board will be installed before the very first regular season home game for the Alouettes. And you're talking. There's one other seats that you were talking about. They got these new on-field suites over on the south side. I don't know how those are going to work, but it's over near in the end zone over near us, over near sections Y and Z. But I'm curious to see what those are like. They're going for the experience. I mean, as you guys remember, it was pretty much touted that right after the Grey Cup they had 700 extra season tickets that were sold. I'm curious to know what the number is now, because I'm sure being Grey Cup champs, they want to take as much advantage of it as possible. So I'm just looking to maybe a preseason game coming up, guys, this weekend. I don't care. It's just getting back and seeing game action over at Percival Molson. That's what I'm really hyped up for. But it's going to be very interesting to see what they do at Percival Molson all year. No matter how the team is doing, what they just have planned is really cool. And that 50th anniversary thing for the Grey Cup, that'll be interesting too. I have a few ideas, but I'm really curious to see what they're going to do.
Nice.
Yeah. And so kind of keeping in the same topic with stadiums. So Vancouver's hosting the Grey Cup this year, Winnipeg next year. In 2026, that's going to mark 18 years since Montreal has hosted. We all know the issues with the Big O, but we also have heard that they're going to be spending a crap load of money apparently renovating it.
Yep.
So
again,
yeah. So what do you think timeline is here in seeing Montreal hosting another Grey Cup?
And honestly, in my opinion, if this thing with the new roof and the new the ring itself that needs to be replaced, with all honesty, my opinion is as early as 28, 29.
Nice.
If ever again. That's the way that I see. Yeah, if ever again, because
that's a $700 billion question.
No, it's higher now. We're talking
geez.
Yeah. We're talking about it. They came out with, I know why. They basically was spent 2 times the amount on this stadium.
Man, you could build an underground stadium for that much.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it's now up over 100.
Wow.
So it's just nuts. And the place is so, people were saying, "Oh, we got to go back to the Big O." For what? No.
Yeah, I was there for Metallica. No.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, and I don't care what they say that, Taylor Swift would have come if they would have had a good roof. Are you nuts? There's no way. There's no way Taylor Swift would come.
She's going everywhere.
It's weird in Montreal, and I think it's a Canadian thing. Like in the States, it seems like, our stadium's 10 years old, let's just build a new one. But here, it's completely different in that regard.
Yeah, I think that, will there ever be a new stadium? I don't know. I love the atmosphere of Percival Molson. I always have. I've always hated the Big O. The sight lines are just absolutely horrible. But obviously there's a big thing when it comes to nostalgia. And when it comes to any old stadium, look what they have in baseball, what they have some in football, the NFL and gridiron football and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know. The question is where it would be if they ever had a new one. I mean, honestly, guys, I would love to see, I know this will never happen, but I would love to see at least one more Grey Cup at Percival Molson. Sure, you might stretch to maybe 30,000 seats with some extra stands and whatnot. The tickets will be expensive as hell, but you know what? I would just one more time to see a Grey Cup at Percival Molson. I would love that.
Yeah, I'm in for that. I'm in for a Grey Cup in Montreal, period. Just have a place to play. That's all we need. Tim Capper is a co-host of the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast. Thanks for coming on the show and getting us ready for 2024 Alouettes football.
My pleasure, guys. Love watching you, and let's get the CFL season going.
And joining the show right now is a contributor at 3 Down Nation. It is Santino Filoso, right?
There you go. Yeah, nailed it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on to talk Red Blacks.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Now, I look at the past 4 seasons of Red Blacks football. It's 3-15, 3-11, 4-14, the last 2 seasons. And then I went back to the 2018 season when they made the Grey Cup against Calgary. They actually had 14 wins that season alone, including the preseason and the playoffs. How critical is it for this team to get off to a good start?
Honestly, a good start is essential just to kind of get the fans to buy in and everything like that. But at the end of the day, if they stumble out of the gate, it's okay, but this has to be a playoff season. I think, you've talked about the struggles that have gone on. Ottawa is a good football market, but I do think that there is a little bit of apathy setting in. People want to, because it's not even that Ottawa has been bad in recent years, it's just they haven't even been entertaining. So the offense has been very stagnant. It's crazy that since Trevor Harris left, whether that was of his own accord or the team didn't want him anymore, there's people that go back and forth on that one. But the reality is Ottawa's had 10 quarterbacks trying to find, since then, start a game, trying to find, right? They've had Dominic Davis, John Jennings, Will Arndt, Matt Nichols, Devlin Hodges, Caleb Evans, Nick Arbuckle, Tyree Adams, Dustin Crum last year, and of course, Jeremiah Masoli, who struggled with injuries. And to be honest with you, even when Masoli's been healthy, he hasn't actually been great for Ottawa. So I think having Drew Brown now, if he's actually ready to be the guy and if he can give them some stable quarterback play, I think that will go a long way. Because, fans want to be entertained. In the past couple of years, even when Ottawa's had leads in fourth quarters, there's kind of been a feeling amongst the fan base, like, how are they going to lose this game? And unfortunately, more often than not, they found ways to do it. So I think it really is time for like a culture reset. And I think, that Ottawa's front office has done a good job, especially this past few off seasons, kind of identifying who players are they believe should be a part of the solution going forward. And I think that they brought in some guys with good attitudes that, can hopefully contribute to that kind of winning culture and to kind of put these past couple of years behind the franchise so they can go back to that momentum they had early on when they came back to town.
Now, I feel like continuity is very important to a franchise in sports, and in the CFL, you look at the most successful ones, they haven't changed much in that front office, but you did talk about a culture reset. How tough is that to pull off when you have the same guys in place? You know what I mean? It does feel like Bob Dice and Sean Burke, they got to be feeling that seat heat up a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think there's pressure on both of them, right? Obviously Desjardins was previously the only GM that Ottawa had, but Burke kind of came in, and it takes some time to put your own stamp on a team. Obviously, you can't change a team. Well, you can change a team overnight, but there's no guarantee that's going to be successful. So I think now that he's had 2 full drafts, 2 full off seasons under his belt, this is distinctly his team now, right? I don't think there's really many holdovers from the Desjardins era, and he had his coach. He didn't inherit Bob Dice. He hired Bob Dice. I think at this point, the reality is it's a results-oriented business, and now it's time to get those results. And I think that despite everything that's gone on in the past, there is kind of a feeling amongst the fan base that it is possible and it is doable. Because some of the additions they had, like getting a Darius Pickett, the defense was already kind of a strength. Unfortunately, last year, I think I have to double check, but I believe the stat is that they did give up not only a league high 504 points, but I think that's the most points that any Ottawa Red Blacks franchise has given up since they came back to the league in 2014. So that's a lot of points, but a lot of those points came from the defense just being on the field too much. So, the defense was very strong. They managed to retain and bring back their entire defensive line. They've got a very veteran linebacking core. And then when you add in a Darius Pickett, I think that's a huge, huge addition. And then you bring a guy like Dominic Grimes in, and, he started with Ottawa. It kind of drove fans crazy because he had 1,000 yards, but he probably could have had 1,500 that one season because he had a lot of drops and he was just very inconsistent. But he's gone to BC. His game's developed. He's refined his route running. His hands have been phenomenal. And so I think there's a lot of excitement having him come back because he definitely is a tone setter. He has that kind of alpha mentality that you want. And, I think Jalen Acklin has that as well. But for whatever reason, maybe he was being played out of position. Maybe he kind of struggled with injuries. He didn't get the quarterback play. I think it's been kind of hard. So having like Rhymes and Acklin, and then you throw guys in there like Justin Hardy, Braylon Addison. I think there's a lot of potential for Ottawa's offense to be able to move the ball, which is, as I said, something that fans are going to be looking forward to, I think.
I do feel like the fans were almost sort of understanding with the struggles of the offense, because some of those injuries, I mean, they were not self-inflicted. Some were just complete accidents. But now we already talked Drew Brown a little bit. He gets acquired from Winnipeg for the draft pick. They sign him to 2 years, but it's still a crowded quarterback room. I remember Dustin Crum last year, like the fans, even the team. I remember that comeback win, the Crumback, and the celebration from Dice and the fans. It was such a good moment from last year, but obviously you want more than 4 of those in a season. Tyree Adams is still there. Jeremiah Masoli took a pay cut to stay. Like, where does he fit in? Is Brown starting as, the solid number one?
I think Brown's gotten the majority of the reps. So I think that the idea is he will be the undisputed starter. Of course, you never say never, depends on how the preseason goes. But I think that they're giving Brown a lot of leeway, and kind of he's approaching the job. And I think the team is approaching the preseason and training camp as if he is the starter. You talked about Dustin Crum, and kind of wanting to see a few more wins. I agree completely. But at the same point in time, I mean, if you really think back, when was the last time you saw a rookie quarterback start as many games as Crum did? I think he started 14 or 15 games as a rookie. You don't see that in the CFL. In the CFL, guys will kind of dip their toe in, play a quarter here or there, a preseason game, maybe 1 or 2 games, but they'll kind of, I'll say, season for a few years. And then before they actually kind of take on the starting role, kind of like Drew Brown, right? He spent a couple years in Winnipeg. He's played here and there when Collaros has been hurt, but he didn't, it's funny to say, but Dustin Crum actually has more starts than career-wise than Drew Brown does. But of course, when you start a rookie at quarterback, especially when there are other injury issues along the offensive line and the receiving corps like Ottawa had last year, you have rookie growing pains. So on one hand, I do think that it's very interesting for Ottawa that if for any reason they need to turn to Crum, you would hope that he's a lot further along in his development than most second-year quarterbacks would be, just simply because he has all that playing experience, good moments and bad moments that kind of every quarterback has to go through. You mentioned Tyree Adams. I don't think he's fully healthy yet, but I know that he's working back from his ACL injury. And of course, he didn't play much last year, but when he did, he looked good and was quite exciting. And then you talked about Jeremiah Masoli, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think best case for Ottawa, he doesn't take a snap this season. Because to me, if Masoli doesn't step on the field for any meaningful plays, then it means that Drew Brown is the guy. Or it means that if Drew Brown goes down, Dustin Crum has stepped up, and you kind of got that sophomore, not a slump, but the opposite, like a sophomore takeoff, if anything. So I think in a perfect world, the Red Blacks don't want to see Masoli on the field. Of course, I think it's excellent having that veteran and experienced voice in the room. I think it might help a lot too, especially as they're installing Tommy Condell's system, right? Masoli has experience with that. So of course, if Masoli ends up on the field, for any reason, everyone's going to be cheering for him, myself included. I hope, especially after the horrible injury luck he's had the past couple of years. I mean, it would really be nice to see him have a good comeback story. But I think as far as the Red Blacks are concerned, you kind of don't want to see him on the field. You want to see Brown be that guy.
Well, let's talk about Tommy Condell then. He comes in as the OC of the team, replacing Kahari Jones. Condell spent several years in Hamilton, and those Ticat fans grew kind of restless with that offense, but what were you expecting to see from them? You mentioned Masoli being familiar with the system, and I would say Jalen Acklin would be familiar with that system as well.
Yeah, and also Braylon Addison, right? So I think you have quite a few guys who are kind of versed in the system and the verbiage. And I think, obviously, if you're Ottawa, the hope is that you get that 2019 Tommy Condell offense, which, I think led the league in scoring. The Ticats went 15-3, got them a trip to the Grey Cup. And that was a very dangerous attack, of course. That was a while ago now, 2019 was quite some time in the past. I think you can probably expect an offense that is going to be very physical, because that's something that since he was first hired as the interim, since he was first brought in as kind of the interim coach and then officially hired, Bob Dice has always preached wanting to be a tough physical team. And that's how a lot of the games were called last year. They kind of lean into the run. Of course, losing Devontae Williams is a huge loss. You never want to lose a guy in off-season training. So that kind of sucks. But, as harsh as this may sound in the CFL, it's kind of easy to replace running backs. You might not get the same level of production or the explosiveness that you would get out of someone like Devontae Williams. But, I think one of the American backs in camp now will probably be a good fill-in. And so I think you're probably going to see an emphasis on the run. I think you'll see a lot of play action. And then hopefully with guys like Rhymes and Acklin and Addison and Hardy, you'll see the ball being pushed down the field. And maybe some more explosive plays.
Is there anybody that has a leg up in that running back competition right now, or does it seem pretty even at this point?
So I think today they just released the depth charts for tomorrow's game, and I think Armstead has been named the starter. That kind of checks out with what I've heard at camp. He's gotten a lot of reps with the ones. Hill has also been getting the kind of splitting carries, so having some time with the ones. So I think they'll actually give both of those American, I'll say rookies. They both have NFL experience, but they're both new to the CFL. I think both of them will have a chance to kind of state their case. Obviously, practice is one thing, but kind of doing it in a game when the hits are for real is something else. Of course, you also have Amilcar Polk, who's Canadian and who was with the Ottawa GGs. It's probably unlikely, just because of the way that Ottawa does their ratio, that they would start a Canadian at running back. But you honestly never know. I mean, Jackson Bennett got some games last year. He got some carries here and there. So I could see Polk getting some kind of role like that. But one of the starters, I would guess maybe Armstead or Hill. But I guess we're going to have to wait and see how the preseason plays out.
It does seem like maybe the top 3 or 4 receivers are solid spots there. Acklin, Hardy, Rhymes. He's become a touchdown machine since going to BC. 17 touchdowns in the last 28 games, something like that. Is there anybody else that fans should keep an eye on? I know Nick Mardner, the recent draft pick, not saying he'll start, but there was a lot of people that thought he wasn't even going to be in the CFL this year. So it seems like that gamble sort of worked for the Red Blacks to have him in camp and on the field with the team. But is there any other newcomers at receiver that could be a threat?
In terms of Americans, there's Khalil Pimpleton. So he's a new rookie American, and he's smaller, but from everything I've heard, he's been very explosive in camp. He has great hands. The team had like an inter-squad scrimmage last week, and apparently he was like one of the stars. He's had a very strong camp. I'm very interested to see what he does in the preseason game tomorrow, because he is starting. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. And then in terms of the Canadian receivers, Martyr could make an instant impact, because the reality is, with the way Ottawa does their ratio, they are going to be starting a Canadian at receiver. Now, whether that is someone like Keaton Brugling, who's from Ottawa. Sorry, not Ottawa. I can't even say that, especially because I'm from Carleton. So, I don't know what your language is, but there is a chant about Ottawa U players that I won't say. But I'm a Carleton Raven alum. So definitely cheering for the Ravens alumni. So it'd be cool to see Brugling do well. There's also Bloomfield, who was the 4th round pick that Ottawa added. Of course, Marco Dubois has been with the team for a few years. He's mainly featured on special teams, and Ottawa does kind of use him more as a tight end. But he has kind of produced when he does get balls thrown his way. So it'd be interesting to see if he maybe kind of states a claim. And then Ottawa also did draft a couple of Canadian receivers last year. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out. I think Mardner is very interesting because, as you said, a lot of people thought that he would kind of go to the NFL. And obviously he was with the Giants in minicamp. He didn't stick with them. Of course, his size is intriguing because he's 6'6", and you almost never see a 6'6" Canadian receiver. In fact, I think he's the 2nd tallest player on the team, behind Dante Bull, who's obviously an offensive lineman, a tackle. But so obviously with his height, jump balls would be a nice thing. But also he's got a lot of speed. So he's kind of a unicorn in the sense that you don't see a lot of Canadian receivers that are 6'6", 210 pounds, and can kind of move the way he does. So that will be quite interesting to see, if he can build on, a strong training camp and have a good preseason game, couple of games, and maybe kind of state his case that way.
Well, you mentioned Dante Bull, a physical offensive lineman, former first-round pick. They added veterans Darius Bladek and Philip Norman on the O-line. So I think they're going to be very physical to deal with on both sides of the ball. And we'd mentioned Adarius Pickett already. I think he was an absolute star for the Argos last year. He's a great addition to that Red Blacks team, even though some veterans and longtime Red Blacks are no longer going to be there, like Sherrod Baltimore, Abdul Kenna, and Carrell Brooks retired as well. So how are you expecting that Baron Miles defense to shape up this year?
I think you can expect a very aggressive defense. Obviously, as I said, I think bringing back the entire defensive line was huge for them. And then when you pair that with the veterans that they have at linebacker, whether it's Pickett, whether it's Javon Santos Knox at middle linebacker, you also have Frankie Griffin. So there's quite a few names in there of guys who not only are tough and kind of have that swagger attitude that you want from your linebacking core, but also they have the ability to cover. So I think when you have something like that, it gives your coordinators a lot of kind of leeway, and it allows them to be creative with your blitz packages and your stunts and twists and things like that. So yeah, I'm expecting Baron Miles' defense to cause some headaches for opposing offenses. You mentioned the secondary. The secondary has been an issue for Ottawa, unfortunately, for a while. Last year was a little bit difficult because you have those veterans, as you talked about, Kenna and Sherrod Baltimore and Brooks. A couple of them kind of struggled to stay healthy and on the field. Like, Kenna has always been just such a physical guy who's always giving 120, kind of plays with that reckless abandon that as a fan you love to watch, but just takes such a physical toll. So yeah, he missed some games last year. Baltimore missed a few games. He was banged up. And so yeah, none of those guys have returned, have been brought back. But I do think that there are a couple of young guys who could step up. And so yeah, that should be kind of interesting to see who establishes themselves. Because yeah, there's 3 jobs potentially up for grabs. And it's really going to be, I think, quite wide open.
Now, Devontae Dedmon returned from the NFL last year. I think he only played 2 games before missing the rest of the year with a shoulder injury. Do you see him being able to make an impact on offense and special teams? Or are they going to keep him doing the specials for the most part?
Well, I mean, Dedmon, he set the CFL record for becoming the fastest player to have 5 return touchdowns. And then, when he came back from the NFL, I mean, I think he was a little bit banged up. He got hurt last year, of course. I think there was, with all the different players playing special teams, it might not have been to the same standard you had in the past. So I think, that kind of made his life a little bit more difficult. If he's fully healthy, he absolutely is a game changer, and he is a constant threat to take it to the house. So I would love to see him back 100%. Obviously you want to sprinkle a guy like that in on offense, because when you see a guy that's that dangerous in the open field and how he can make people look like they're grasping at air, you definitely want to try and get the ball in that guy's hands, right? Even if it's just kind of a change of pace or throw him a deep bomb. I know that in the past, Ottawa's even had him line up at running back a few times and done handoffs and screens and different things like that. So I do think that there's a lot of potential to get creative with him. But yeah, I mean, personally, obviously, I'm not a GM or a coordinator, but I feel like given the depth Ottawa has at receiver, they might be kind of better served to just let him really focus on the return game. Like, let him thrive, let him focus on that 100%. Of course, mix in something here or there if someone goes down. But I would really like to see what he could do if he was fully healthy and just kind of totally dedicated to the return game, because I think that he could have a pretty special season.
It is the 10th season of Ottawa REDBLACKS football. As hard as that is to believe, Henry Burris will be in town for a visit. They've got the merch. Big Rec is playing the Canada Day game. Now, I want to take a couple moments off the table. I want to take the 2016 Grey Cup off the table. And is it the 2015 East Final to Greg Ellingson, if I'm remembering correctly? Do you have a favorite moment in Ottawa REDBLACKS history? You've been writing about the team for longer than the team has been on the field, so
yeah, exactly.
I'd love to know.
So I've been writing about them since 2013, so yeah, that is indeed true. Honestly, probably the home opener in 2014, the first game against the Argos. I mean, it might not have been the most offensively exciting game because Ottawa kicked 6 field goals, but they kicked a late field goal. I think it was the last minute to take an 18-17 lead. And then when the Argos were marching down the field, Jasper Simmons ended up picking off, I think Ricky Ray was the quarterback, to seal the win. And I was at the game, and it was just electric. Like, it just popped, like all day there was a buzz around town, all around Bank Street. I'm not sure if you've been to Ottawa, but Ottawa has, like, I normally sit on the south side because the north side sucks. But yeah, I'm a south sider, and so I have a bunch of friends and family. So we went to the Southsiders tailgate at Brewer Park. From there, have a couple of drinks, eat some food, walk down to the stadium, down Bank Street. And it was so cool. All the businesses, had signs up and stuff like that. And the vibe was so good. And then I think it was such a great way just to kind of announce that, Ottawa's back. And then just to get a win was just so sweet. So for me, that will always be a super, super special memory. I mean, the first time qualifying for the playoffs. I know you said the moment's off the table, but just Ellingson catching that bomb at the end of the 2015 East Final was, again, I was at the game, was just electric. It's probably like the top sporting moment of my life to this day. I would say I even enjoyed it more than the Grey Cup win. Wow. The Grey Cup win, obviously, the following year was amazing, but just finally, getting back to the Grey Cup after everything, because for Ottawa, they hadn't been back since the 1981 game. So yeah, to finally have someone punch it back and just to come in that fashion was incredible. So yeah, those are some very good moments. And then yeah, I mean, there's just so many different things. You have, like, it's kind of silly, but like Gott when he crushed a beer in the end zone after a touchdown one game, that was great. You had the game where Henry Burr set the CFL record for completions.
Yeah.
There was the 2018 East Final where Trevor Harris was just on fire and threw 6 touchdowns and could not be stopped. There was the snow game in the 2016 East Final, also at TD Place, and that the players doing snow angels in the end zone. There's been a lot of really cool moments. So yeah, it's been great to have a team back, especially because obviously I'm not as old as some of the fans who have been following the team for decades, and with the Renegades and Rough Riders. I mean, I was alive when the Renegades were around, but I was a kid when I went to those games, so I don't really remember them. I was a teenager when the Renegades were around, so obviously that one I was very into it. So yeah, I think for fans that have gone through losing a team and having it back, I think that also kind of gives a lot of the fan base perspective, because obviously the last couple of years have been shitty, but I would rather my football team be shitty and have a team than to not have a team. So I think that a lot of people kind of have that feeling, but also a lot of people are tired of the losing. People want to see winning, and so I think there's a lot of optimism and hope that this year is the year on the 10th anniversary. I know they're doing a lot of different things, as you mentioned. They're flying a bunch of guys into town to kind of mark the Grey Cup win. For the 10th anniversary, they're doing all kinds of different themes and stuff like that. They'll be having a new jersey at some point released that I think will become the main home jersey, replacing the current one. I don't know exactly when that will be, but I think it will be in the coming weeks. I would assume it would be before they have their first home game of the regular season.
Yeah.
But that would be kind of nice. And there have been hints that it might have some retro features. And I mean, that's something the fan base has been clamoring for forever, because, the Rough Riders were around for 120 years and there's a lot of history there. And I think anytime you can kind of incorporate that, then, you're doing something right. So I think there's a lot of reasons to kind of be excited about this season for a Red Blacks fan. And I mean, if you kind of look around the division, obviously Montreal is going to be a tough out, defending Grey Cup champs. You got to tip your hat to them. But, when you are the defending Grey Cup champs, you're also the hunted. So that's hard. And I mean, if you look around, I'm not a big believer in Bo Levi Mitchell. I'm just going to be honest and put that out there. He has not looked the same in recent years. So, Hamilton kind of tying themselves to him again for another season. Who knows how that goes? And then the Argos with Chad Kelly, his whole situation, how they've constantly mishandled that every single step of the way. And now he's going to be gone for at least half the season. So, they're going to be using a rookie at quarterback unless it ends up being Arbuckle. But even then, as someone who's watched a lot of Arbuckle playing football the last couple of years, I'm not sure how high his ceiling is. So, I mean, if you're an Ottawa fan and you're looking around the division, you got to like your odds against Hamilton and Toronto when you play them. So, yeah, I mean, it feels like there's a lot of possibility. But, of course, everybody kind of has hope in the preseason. So let's see how everything plays out. But, yeah.
Santino Filoso is a contributor at 3downnation.com. He's coming to us from Brazil, and all the way from Brazil, you heard him, Northside sucks. I think that's what I'll go with this year. Is Northside the one that's covered?
Yeah, they have the roof.
And that's why they suck? Or is it
wrong? Exactly. They're kind of soft, you know what I mean? Like, they don't want to get wet. They're made of sugar. I mean, historically, they might not have made as much noise, so they needed the roof there to help project that noise to the field, you know what I mean? So, yeah. No, I think that rivalry has definitely kind of simmered down a little bit. It has. Years, for sure. Especially because it's when they redid the stadium in 2014, they kind of flipped the boxes that were on the north over to the south side, and the media's on the south side now.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, the South still. I'm still a South Sider, a proud South Sider for sure. Always will be. But yeah, I don't know. I got to be honest. The North Side, especially because I think overall probably the average ticket there is a little bit cheaper. So they're getting louder. So I respect it. I respect it. They suck. They don't suck like compared to everybody else. They just suck compared to Southsiders, compared to other fan bases. I still love them. You know what I mean? But yeah, like compared to the South, Northside sucks. Yeah, for sure.
Santino, thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And joining the show right now is Adam Gosse, the PA announcer for the Toronto Argonauts. Thanks for being here, my man. It's good to see you.
It's an absolute pleasure, boys. How you guys doing?
Oh, I think we're doing good. We're ready for the season. Let's talk about the 2022 Grey Cup champions, the 16-2 Toronto Argonauts. But let's get the elephant in the room out of the way right now. Yes. 2023 MOP Chad Kelly not with the team for at least 9 games. But then, other than that, there has seemed like a big exodus of all-stars from the roster as well since the 2023 East Final.
Such is the price of fame, my man. When you're a record-setting 16-2, and by the way, the Argos earned their best statistical season on record in their 150th anniversary season. So a little bit of magic there. Super, super cool. What a ride. It was almost guaranteed win night every time you went to the stadium. So home and away. So a lot of fun. But yes, that also means an exodus of players. We Hamilton took our heart, Edmonton took our soul. So it's great. It's all great. We got a lot of guys who are ready to fill those voids. But and it's great for the league. I think if I look across the league right now, at least 4 of the starting quarterbacks are former Argonauts. You've got Cody Fajardo. Yeah, you've got McLeod Bethel Thompson, you've got Zach Collaros, Trevor Harris. I'm sure I'm missing one, but yeah, Dakota Prukop is out there somewhere. So it's kind of flattering. If they can't beat us, join us. That whole philosophy. But now we've got to go back to work. We got to find new guys. Guys got to step up. They got to find a way to fill the challenge. I'm not expecting 16-2, certainly. But it's going to be really exciting to see who those next crop of superstars are.
The only 16-2 seasons did not end in the best game of the season, so maybe avoid that record for a while.
Give me a 15-3 and I'll be happy.
Exactly. It does seem like Cameron Dukes will open the season as QB1, but I'm actually surprised by the addition of Nick Arbuckle in the last week and a half. The double blue game, it looks like he lit it up. He's kind of familiar with Ryan Dinwiddie after all, but now is Cameron Dukes solid as opening the season as QB1 in Toronto?
Yeah, I think Dukes is in a good spot to start the season. By no means do I think he's going to have a very long leash. As we know, wins are important, whether it's early or late. And there's a very big question mark. Will Chad Kelly return? If he does, when? We know that he's a proven winner. This is Cameron Dukes' opportunity to shine. Arbuckle is obviously a very interesting addition, but not totally surprising when you think about it. If you take away Arbuckle from that room, you've got a quarterback room with 2 second-year CFL pros. So You had to add a veteran voice. I know he's not a Grizzly vet like like a Bethel Thompson would be, but he's someone that does have experience in this league with winning football. He had winning football in Calgary, and if he could add a little bit of that calming presence to a young Dukes and Scott, then we're better off for it. You might play. He might play. We're going to see what happens in the next couple weeks. But the smart money, I believe, is on number 11.
Nice. So 3 straight years as first place in the East Division. How has the 2023 Coach of the Year, Ryan Dinwiddie, handled training camp this year with all the change?
That's the $1 million question. It's the change. It's the distraction of what happened with Chad Kelly. It's all these new faces. It's continuing that winning culture. He's got a big task ahead of him. But he's put together what I think is a quality coaching staff. They added Demetrius Maxey from Edmonton. Defensive role with William Fields and Kevin Ivan. Kevin Ivan is a veteran coach, and he knows the old system that was implemented by Corey Mace very well. So I think they're going to be okay. They can rely on 2 things: the best offensive line in the CFL and a staunch defense. And when you've got question marks around quarterback, what better soft landing than having a fantastic offensive line and a stifling defense? So we're going to need to lean heavily on both of those, especially early in the season. I expect us to run the ball a fair bit, and to keep things honest. And I do expect our defensive line to get after the quarterback. Those men on our defensive line are absolute dogs, and they're going to be a problem for CFL offenses. So that's fun. I'm excited about all that. But yeah, he's going to have to find some way to generate offense, and he's going to have to manage depth. Depth is one thing I'm not sure we have in abundance as we did the past few seasons, especially last year. Last year, if we had a D lineman and go out of rotation, you have the 5th or 6th guy would show up and get 8 sacks. So we're going to be a little bit more thin this year, so we're going to have to stay healthy. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, let's build on the defense a little bit. Kevin Ivan has been coaching the linebackers. Will Fields has been coaching the secondary, but joining forces this season, co-defensive coordinators. That's kind of an interesting move. How's that dynamic been?
Question. Very unique. They do have a wonderful relationship, so I don't expect any real friction there. It's just going to see how well they communicate on game day. I expect Coach Fields to be in the booth and Ivan on the sideline. So can they react quickly? They're going to have to pivot and make adjustments. We'll see how that goes. Corey's system seemed to be pretty fluid. There's going to be some changes. Obviously, you don't want to be predictable, so there's going to be some changes. I'm excited to see what type of defense they roll out. Will they stay with that aggressive, in-your-face blitzing style? Will they have a lot of disguised blitzes? Will they get the secondary involved? There's going to be some young defensive backs. So, how do they factor in? So it's, again, there's some question marks, but I love to see it. I'm a big Kevin Ivan guy. I've been a fan of his since he was a player, and I'm excited to see what he can do with this role.
Yeah, keeping in the defense, we got Flo, we got Oakman, we got Serezna, McManus, Adeleke. Like, this defense still has a lot of impact players, and it's still going to be a problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, Quincy Moje from BC. Absolutely. There's some real players on this D. They got to stay healthy for sure. But I don't expect a ton of drop off from our starting unit year over year. Some of our Argo staffers have gone so far as to say this defense is better. At least they've in training camp.
Wow.
I will reserve judgment until until the live bullets start flying. But that's a promising endorsement.
Yeah, no doubt. But I do have to ask, last year there was times when, the playoffs were clinched and the game was clinched. So a lot of depth guys got into games and they got a lot of valuable playing time. That's probably pretty big to start off this season with a lot of the vets finding paychecks elsewhere.
100%. And this is one of the reasons why there's a little bit of a breath of we're not panicking around the thought of starting Cameron Dukes, because we wrapped up the division so early last season. Dukes had a lot of playing time down the stretch. We walked into a very nasty environment in Winnipeg, and he came off guns blazes, scoring drives on his two first drives, and he left in the fourth quarter with a lead, and a game that Winnipeg needed. So, he showed a lot of moxie down the stretch. He played some good football. He can move. But yeah, guys like Cameron Dukes got a lot of opportunities, with such a run of success. And those guys will be better for it this year, too.
Yeah, so let's talk about the other little elephant in the room here, running backs. We kind of got your boy, so it's going to look a little different there. But you still have depth there with Kadeem Carey, especially when he's healthy. So what do you think is going to be the situation there, and how's he been looking in camp?
Yeah. First of all, I expect an increase, or can I expect an increase in mullets in the province of Saskatchewan, if that's at all possible?
I don't know if it is possible, actually.
We love AJ to pieces. Our hearts broke when he left, but my goodness, he's in a great place. I know he's absolutely adored by that fan base already, and you're gonna love him. Absolutely. Wave that proudly. He's going to bring a lot of energy, and he's going to connect with a lot of fans. That man is very accessible. I know that we love our athletes in the CFL for their accessibility, but his door always seems to be open for fans, and that's hard to find. But back in Toronto, Kadeem Carey, yes, love that signing. You had to have it. We needed a veteran back. Our next two guys are relatively young. Dan Adeboboye is in his third or fourth year. I think he's primed for more reps, but it looks like in training camp that Carey still has the lion's share of the duties. Beyond that is Deonta McMahon. Now, when you're looking at someone like Deonta McMahon, I think that fits two holes. We have a kick return and punt return position to fill. Javon Leake having departed for Edmonton, so we need a returner. McMahon is one of those who's been in the rotation in camp and returns. So if you dress McMahon, then you could have a running back too, as well as your returners. Adeboboye has been an ace on special teams, and he's a Canadian, so obviously he gives you racial flexibility. I like Dan, another guy who showed flashes of brilliance last year when thrust into the lineup. He had a monster game in Saskatchewan. Sorry, Sheldon.
Oh, I remember it well.
Yeah. And then of course he got hurt. So he might still be, there might still be some caution about him recovering from his injury enough that he's not getting the reps in camp right now. That could change in the next week or two. But we'll see. If Kadeem Carey can stay healthy, because there have been some durability questions, then I don't see much of a drop off. I guess a bigger question is, can he catch the football? I don't know how much he was expected to do that in Calgary, but in this offense, I do expect a little more check downs, screens, flats, things like that. So he might be busier than we expect.
Yeah, so let's go to receivers. So we have Rashad Bailey, who is a nice pickup for you guys, as well as draft pick Kevin Mittal joining the likes of DeMonte Coxey and DeVaris Daniels. Who are some other pass catchers that we should be looking out for?
Well, for sure, someone who may have flown under the radar last year, but David Ungerer III, or as he was referred to, Dave Ungerer. All that man does is catch footballs. He doesn't. He's got maybe the softest hands in the team. As does Dejon Brissett. Brissett just seems to come down with the football regardless of the traffic that he's in. He seems to have one circus catch a game, and he scores a lot of touchdowns. He's been an end zone target on this team. So and also Canadian. So Ungerer, Brissett, Tommy Neild, Richie Sindani, great Canadian talent. Sindani is an interesting one because he's shown when he catches the football, he can do something with it. He had that clutch catch down the stretch in Saskatchewan to help us win last year. But you can also unfortunately, you can also rely on Santini for at least one drop. So, and he's had a few drops. He had one last night, unfortunately. So he's in tough if he wants to make this team. But I love our depth. Yeah, Bailey. Who else? I can't think of anyone else immediately, but I think I wrote it down. We have a total of 15 wide receivers in camp.
Wow.
So there's going to be some changes.
Well, you did talk about the defensive backs a little bit earlier, and it looks like maybe there's about 20 of them in camp. Yeah. But there is...
You're pretty close. There's 18 defensive backs.
Okay, and there's lots of veterans, though, like McFadden, Adeleke, Amos, and I think this is something we need to... Is it Metier? Royce Metier?
It is Royce Metier, yes.
That has to be an adjustment for you, the PA guy.
Yeah, I've had to say it out loud a few times. I was at the Double Blue game last Monday, and I said it out loud just to make sure I'm getting comfortable with it. But those things are not unusual. In 2022, AJ Ouellette was, for us for a while, it was AJ Ouellette.
Yeah.
Because we look at that name in Canada, and for the most 9 times out of 10, it's a francophone pronunciation. But it was, I'm going to get this wrong, but it was either his aunt or his grandmother. Somebody contacted the team and said, by the way, it's Ouellette. So it didn't come from AJ. It came.
He was
from
like so polite. He didn't like.
It's remarkable how many players do that, Trav. It's players are so polite they almost don't want to remind you, hey, you're mispronouncing my name.
Right.
So Royce, after several seasons, finally said, you know what? He's getting some family pressure. Your name is Royce Metier.
Yeah.
So he was very, very gentle with us this year and said, hey, could you let everybody know? So
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I mess up names constantly on here, so I completely understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to ask you're the PA guy. You're a part of the game day experience in Toronto. So talk about the game day experience and what fans can expect going to the stadium in 2024.
Look, I'll tell you this. With respect to Rider Nation and the Bomber fans and what's going on in BC and all that, which are all wonderful stories, of course, and we need every market to thrive. The fans who come to BMO Field for an Argo game bring a big bag of energy every week. If it's 13,000, if it's 16,000, if it's 20,000, the place is always loud. There's really no such thing as a bandwagon Argo fan. So the ones that show up with purpose, and it's a lot of fun in there. It's a loud environment. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. Our video board is great. Our social media team cooks up a lot of interactive stuff. So when there's a break in play, you can look at something on the Jumbotron and entertain yourself. We've got 2 great hosts. It's the sight lines in the building are awesome. But on top of all that, MLSE is really, I'm going to pump their tires for a minute. They allow me to be me. They encourage crowd prompts. They allow me and actually encourage me to bring a lot of energy and drive noise on defense and things like that. So they give me a lot of rope, and I will use every inch of it. So it helps the atmosphere. I try to get the fans involved with certain calls, and it helps them feel like they're part of the action because they are. So it's great. If you haven't been, come on down, pay us a visit. And I know that Rider Nation is excited because we're having a Rider home game for the first time, I think, in 4 seasons. So I expect a lot of green in August for that exhibition game.
Yeah, they've always been out further east.
Yes.
in Halifax or something like that. So that's awesome.
Yes.
That's nice. Well, I look at the roster, and I know there's changes, but I think Toronto had the best depth in the league last year. They showed it with the backups that they were whooping people with still. So
Yeah.
it's like those guys are gonna snap. Sheldon knows. All they needed was that one win at the end of the year, and they couldn't beat the Argo backups. So those Argo backups, a lot of them are now starters. Adam Gosse is the PA announcer at BMO Field. You'll even hear that Argos. I mean, that's I love that. Hey, thanks for doing this and talking Argos with us, man.
My pleasure, guys. Great to chat with you. Looking forward to getting this thing rolling.
Well, Sheldon, thanks to Troy, Tim, Santino, Adam for all coming on the show to talk about their respective teams. Let's lock it in. Let's predict how we think the East is going to lay out. I'm going to start here. I got the champs, the most continuity. I think they're going to finish first in the East, host the East final. It's the Montreal Alouettes. The Ottawa REDBLACKS are going to get back into the playoffs. They are going to have a home playoff game hosting the East Division semifinal. This is the year, the 10th year of REDBLACKS football, where they get back into the playoffs. I think the Argos, they're not going to repeat 16-2. Nobody's going to be 16-2 this year. They're still going to squeak into the playoffs at third in the East. Right now, I do have the Ticats with Scott Milanovich at last place. In the East, no disrespect. I know we got lots of Ticat fans, and I'm not trying to throw shade. It's just somebody's got to finish fourth, and that's what I got. You had Montreal first as well, Sheldon, but how did the rest of your East shake out?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much undisputed that Montreal will be first. But in second, I have Toronto. I still think that the continuity that they do have, I hope that the distraction that's going to be around the first 9 games of the season doesn't hang too hard on them. I think that they're going to be able to get it done and finish second in the East. And then third place, I have Hamilton. I think just seeing what Bo did in his first time in the preseason there, I think he might be able to get back to a little bit more where Bo likes to be. So I do think that they are going to finish third, but that doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs. And then I have Ottawa, unfortunately, in fourth there. But I hope I'm wrong about Ottawa, because I have a soft spot for them.
And I actually still think that Toronto defense is probably first place caliber. So if they're going to
D's going to win them a lot of games.
Yeah. If they're going to be, making their offense, giving them good field position, all season long, then hey, the Argos are still going to be a force to reckon with. Third might be a little dumb on my part, but hey, I locked it in. Make sure you subscribe to the show in your favorite podcatcher or YouTube, because in the very near future, maybe even tomorrow, we're going to be releasing our West Division previewing those teams and also locking in our predictions for the CFL season. I'm Travis Currah with Sheldon Jones on the 2 and Out CFL podcast.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.